3,
Okay.
2, 1.
Welcome back, everybody, to Keep It a Buck. We're following up on some really big developments from Apple out of Cupertino yesterday. So they had their developers conference, which they hold every year. And they basically give developers time to create new software as they release new operating systems and new hardware. We've been familiar with Apple's transition to silicon with their generation of M1 and M2 chips. So they updated some of that. But I think the really big movement, aside from iOS, is their Vision Pro, which is really the talk of the town.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So here's the thing with the Vision Pro. Apple is treating this like the next big platform shift. Like they talk about the shift from desktop to laptop to, iPad, iPhone. And now they're saying this is the next big leap, the Apple Vision Pro. This is a mixed reality device. It's basically a headset. Looks kind of like, a pair of goggles or, that you would wear almost like when you're skiing, right? So it's not the, sleekest. Like you probably won't see people anytime soon wearing these walking around on the street. But definitely in comparison to other devices on the market, it is pretty, nice and clean looking. It's made of what, glass and what's the other material? Aluminum, right. So it looks pretty clean in that way. What I think is a big separating factor, I guess kind of their competitive advantage, is when you compare it to other products on the market. In particular, I'm thinking of the Meta Quest and like the Meta Quest 3, which Facebook recently announced like a few days before this. This device, the Vision Pro, yes, it's more expensive. It's around $3,500, whereas other devices on the market, like the Quest 3, not the Pro version, but the Quest 3 is around $500. So it's a big jump in terms of price, but the utility, it's being treated more as like a professional device. And yes, it does have a big entertainment factor, but it does also have that professional utility.
For workflows.
Yes, for workflows, and you can visualize your whole setup around you. You can browse the web. You can, write in a document. They have various like Bluetooth devices you could connect to. So it's used in that way, but it does not have the same, gaming type of feel to it that other devices have where you would put on, like a controller or be, playing games.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they shifted focus not just from using it for entertainment, but for workspaces as well, and even has integration with the MacBook. And that's just part of their ecosystem. The fact that Apple is doing this, it integrates with your iPhone, with existing Apple devices, anything like that. But it's also important to understand this is a computer within itself. It's not operating off of your phone or off of something else. It has its own circuitry. Presumably it has its own cooling system. It runs off of its own battery pack. But I think the real question is, how is this going to be implemented? Because right now, Apple has their regular series and they have their Pro series. Like we're familiar with the iPhone. They have 14, 14 Pro. This is the Vision Pro, right? $3,500. It's not very accessible, honestly. I think not a lot of people need it. It's not a justifiable expense. I'm wondering, as we see this progress, this technology progress, and as it gets lighter, how will it be implemented by everyday people? Is this going to be something you wear at home, or is it just something you're going to walk around in?
Right. When it comes to walking around, this is actually like, I was talking to you, I know a little bit about this earlier, but I wanted to save my true opinion on it for the podcast. As you had said, yes, like it appears transparent, but it's basically when you're looking at somebody wearing them and you see their eyes, you're just seeing basically a screen recording of it, right?
Yeah, it's only a screen on the outside.
From their perspective, when they see the outside world, that's also just a recording through the camera. So would there be some kind of latency issues, or like what if, you're wearing them, you want to wear them outside and you're lagging, or like, something like that where you start bumping into people and issues like that arise? Because I know that is a problem with other VR devices.
And it's kinks like that you mentioned that are going to be the really big inhibitor for this headset coming out. This is version 0. This is the ground level. So if you think about it, even going back to when the first iPhone came out, you don't release an iPhone and along with all applications and it's perfect. The reason it came out now, but it was announced now, it's only coming out next year, is ultimately to give developers time to come up with things. Even then, they're not, maybe they're not going to transition right away. They don't want to take the jump. It's gonna take a lot of time for kinks like that to be worked out, even with the fact that it's very expensive. The concept is amazing. I mean, I've heard people who have used it, they're blown away by the precision, the fact that Apple has created something so realistic, the fact that you can pinch to select something, it tracks exactly where you're looking. The concept is amazing, but those kinks are going to be very real that you mentioned.
Right, and there's obviously going to be an adjustment process when it comes to that. But I think everybody can project, when you look at this long term, like 10, 15 years, and I think that's how Apple is looking at it. This is, their next wave, as I said, the next shift. This device will get sleeker, it will get cleaner, it will get more accessible to wear outside probably. But if you remember in the past, Google, they released the Google glasses, I think they were called.
And they failed.
And exactly, it never ultimately worked out. So I wonder, what kind of adjustments they're going to make based off of seeing that and learning from it.
Well, look, I mean, the Google glasses were arguably ahead of their time. I think that right now, like you said, it's heavy, it's a little bit clunky, it's a large headset. Another thing is, it's kind of strange to see people wearing it. Like even in the press footage that Apple released, they spoke about this feature where you can record something in like a 3D video and make it more realistic and play it back. And you see a father at his kid's birthday party wearing this thing.
Yeah.
It's not realistic at this point because it's so huge. For example, the glasses I'm wearing, right? If it were to get down to this size in, I don't know, 30, 40 years, then it's a little bit, then it makes a bit more sense. But right now, it's sort of gimmicky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks kind of like an antic almost. Like you're not going to see somebody, like you said, like somebody playing with their kids as they're newborns and they're wearing this huge headset on their head that they've plugged into the outlet next to them. Like it's not something realistic, but it is, to me, a little bit, I don't want to say creepy, but just think about, and this is something that they mentioned, when you're recording, like using this headset and it's capturing like all of this 3D footage, and they basically said you can come back to it and watch this video like as if it's really happening to you in real life. Like, can you just think, like, people can start to relive their old memories in that way? I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I mean, there's a certain detachment, obviously, because a human experience is a human experience. At the end of the day, you're still not going to feel things. You're not going to
never know, though. Down the line.
Yeah, maybe down the line. But right now, as it stands, like I said, it's gimmicky. It's for people who love Apple, and I think that a lot people are saying, "Oh, it's $3,500. Who's going to want to buy something like this?" A lot of people are going to be interested in how it works. But I think that it's just going to come down to the fact that this is the introduction, right? They're explaining what they can do, but it stands to see, I guess, how the market reacts, right? We're going to see how these things are selling when they come out next year. Maybe they'll release before the holiday season. People will be giving them as a gift. But what I think is really the future for stuff like this is interaction with other people. And we saw even in the software that Apple was releasing without going into too many details with their iOS platforms, iPadOS platforms, what they're focusing on a lot is not improvements on device, right? Not to say that they're not doing that at all. What they're mainly focusing on is interactions between their ecosystem. So for example, improvements in messages, improvements in AirDrop, stuff like that. So I think what's going to be really big for them is integrating these headsets in a workspace. So you can have a community of people who work together interacting with these headsets.
Right, and they also have that new FaceTime feature where when you're wearing this headset, how exactly does it work? Like they make a scan of your face and then they can basically project the kinds of like facial expressions that
on
you're making while
FaceTime?
wearing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you're wearing it and you're calling somebody else and you're both wearing this, you're not going to actually see their face. It's going to be basically a rendering, an AI rendering of their face, essentially.
Exactly. So effectively what they're doing is they're taking a scan of your face and they create a model of all of your muscle movements, your eyes. There's cameras inside the headset that are recording your eyes. And then they make that model of you on FaceTime, which is arguably a lot less personal than it could be.
Yeah. Right. I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but do you remember like when you were growing up and you would go to the eye doctor and they would tell you like, don't sit too close to your TV, it could mess up your vision.
Yeah.
Like here, it's like this TV is basically like right inside of your eyes. Like it's right in front of you.
That's true. And the crazy thing is, so screen brightness is measured in nits, right? Most headsets, they go up to, one of them goes up to like 100, some of them go up to 1,000. This headset goes up to 5,000 nits of brightness, right? Just for comparison, my computer goes up to 500 nits, right? It's going to be 10 times as bright. It's a couple of inches away from your face. Eye fatigue is going to be very, very real, right? So, and you have to think about it, and when you see people using it, you see through into the real world, right? And then you also see what you're working on. But that's all on a screen. So even the real world that you're seeing, it's still just cameras from the outside.
Exactly. So that'll be interesting to see if any problems with that come up. Like that was honestly one of my first reactions when I saw how they were using it, because this feels like a device that they would want in the future, like you would just be walking around wearing it. Like that seems like that's the direction that they anticipate it to go. I've even heard people say this could be like the replacement of the iPhone, basically. Like, why do you need a phone when like it would do all the same functions, except you could, use your hands and whatever to do the motions. You wouldn't need to hold the actual physical.
If it gets small enough.
Yeah, if it does get small enough, which, as we said, that's in a long while.
And looking forward, I think the way that these things are going to get smaller is with concepts like quantum computing that we're seeing on the rise. There was a Nobel Prize awarded for that recently. And also, when you think about it, like, let's jump for a second to Neuralink, right, with Elon Musk. Is that the next step after this?
Right. So here's the thing with Neuralink. They did just get approved for human trials, but it's very, very raw. Like, I know in past years, they were basically trying it out on animals, and like all the animals that had it installed died. Like, it was like all the rats died that had it. So obviously they've made some tweaks and they've made adjustments, but is it the future? Honestly, I think it is. But I think we're a while away before people get comfortable installing that in their brain. But I do know that a lot of people will be open to it. And essentially, like, give me your thoughts on this. If you have that type of device installed in your brain, are you still really a human, or are you like some kind of cyborg? Like, honestly.
I mean, you're an enhanced version of yourself.
Right.
This is really far past, like, that's why I said the next step after the headsets. Like, the way that I see it, these headsets are going to take a couple of decades just to develop and advance. And then after that, maybe we'll see Neuralink, something like that. It's definitely a visionary idea.
It is.
And it will make a human sort of a mutated version of themselves, because you don't have natural human abilities at that point.
And it even, I don't know how it's going to do this, but I saw Elon saying basically it could extract your own memories and basically save them on a hard drive, and like it'll just deeply enhance the power of your brain.
I mean, that's pretty terrifying.
I know. That's the crazy thing about all of this, is how accurate all of those sci-fi movies are seeming to look now.
I'm going to be honest, I don't think that all this comes down to regulation, right? You can't release this stuff unless it's approved. Even on Apple's website, if you scroll down and you go into the fine print, it says something along the lines of we're still pending approval, and this product might not release if it's not approved, right? I think that the lawmaking system that we have in place today is not ready and does not consist of the people who truly understand what's happening here.
Right.
And like, even looking forward to Neuralink, let's take, for example, electric vehicles, right?
Yeah.
A lot of politicians who make policy about electric vehicles are not familiar with the engineering that goes on with it. It's going to take a shift of a generation until we have people who are experienced with it, who actually grew up with artificial intelligence, who grew up with this virtual reality, and understand how to regulate. Until then, the people who are making decisions about Neuralink and stuff like that won't be comfortable with releasing it.
That's very, very true, and that's a really good point you brought up. And this actually applies even outside of AI, even with regular technology. If you saw, I believe it was like a Senate hearing where the CEO of TikTok, they brought him in for basically questioning. And a lot of the people asking questions were like older, they're like, 60s, 70s. They're not familiar really with how that technology works. So they would ask him ridiculous questions. Like they thought that the fact that TikTok, you could connect to your house Wi-Fi to use it, that meant it was somehow stealing all of your access and things like that. So it will be interesting to see how people that lack, if they lack familiarity with how an iPhone works, imagine when it comes to Neuralink and a VR, and AR headsets.
Right. I mean, that's really far down the line, but it does come down to this approval from different legislature, approving trials from the FDA. I don't think that this headset had to go through FDA trials because it's not integrated into you. It's still an external product. They did do a lot of development in terms of different head shapes, vision, distance to the screen. But this product comes out, it's very important for Tim Cook that this works out. He's been CEO of Apple for a while, and this is sort of his last big product. This is Apple's, I think, only big first-gen product for maybe the last decade. Yeah. Right. And this is a real staple. Like, could this be the next iPhone? Like, is this the start of something much larger?
That's what they're hoping for. And a lot of other companies, I think for something like this, it's important not just to think about it from what we see, but look at what other big players are doing. And from what we could see, Facebook changed their name to Meta. They're trying to embrace the whole, future of the metaverse. You see Microsoft, all of these other companies creating their own new AIs. This does seem to be something that all of the big players think will happen. So I do think, we should really start taking it seriously now that all these new products are coming out. But I have an interesting question for you here. Yeah. We have talked about, all of the future potential, experimental ways that this these devices, the VR devices, could be used in the future.
Mhm.
I want to ask you, day one when Vision Pro comes out, what's like the current use case? Like how would people start using it day one? What would it be effective as? Because like we said, it's not going to be effective of like wearing it the whole time around your house, walking around with your kids. So what would it be used?
I mean, I'm going to be first in line to get it. Just because I think it's really sick. I think that to begin with, like I said, it's going to be difficult to integrate it into workplaces because they don't have that connectivity between headsets. So it's not like if you're working in an office, we could have someone else with a Vision Pro. It's going to be slow. People are going to use it as something cool, right? The only question I have is, just realistically speaking, battery time right now. There's two ways to power it: off of
Outlet?
a battery or off of an outlet. Battery lasts for 2 hours, right? You can't watch a movie, and most movies are 2
Right.
hours plus, you know? I think people are just going to be playing around with it. It's going to be like a family thing. Not everyone really needs their own, especially since you're not using it all the time. But I think that slowly but surely, we're going to see maybe the bolder companies using it in their offices sometimes. And the thing is, it is sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
It's the same thing as having a multi-monitor display, but like a more than one display setup, right? So maybe it'll aid productivity like that, but there will be a learning curve, so people can't be as productive. It's not groundbreaking in the sense that people will immediately become, you know, like be able to get so much more work done. There's no reason that you can't really use a Mac, you know? Well, not that there's no reason you can't use a Mac, but like theoretically, what's the difference between using the Vision Pro and using a Mac, you know?
Right. I honestly think we're pretty far away from it being fully integrated into offices and even people. Like I feel like it's kind of a hassle to, you know, plug yourself in and then you can't really move around when you're wearing it. And like, you know, I don't know, in terms of using it for work, I think we're a little bit far away. I think the most practical usage of it would be for the entertainment aspect. Like let's say you're going on a flight and you want to watch a movie. So you plug it in and then you have this full immersive experience. Or even when you're at home and you want to sit courtside at an NBA game, that's what they like to, you know, use to describe it, like you're really fully immersed in the experience. That I think it will do really well right away is just the entertainment factor. My concern is, how detached are we getting from reality? Like imagine instead of having like a family movie night, it's everybody, you know, like sitting far away and they just have their headsets on. Or instead of people wanting to actually go out and try out new experiences, they're like, oh, okay, I can skydive from my, you know, my Vision Pro headset, so there's no point of trying new things out.
I think that's pretty far off. It's definitely possible. But right now, there's still the aspect of humans evolving for thousands of years that you cannot fight with. It's going to be pretty difficult to trick your brain that you're actually, for example, like you said, skydiving, when you're not skydiving. It'll feel a lot like it. You can feel like you're reliving memories. Ultimately, like I said, it's just going to be a toy for, you know, the people who can afford it. It's amazing that we're even capable of technology like this. The sensors are extremely advanced. The cameras that power it, the processing. It's like all of Apple's development, right, as a company, put into one product.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially in the way that all of the other devices are within this own universe, and it's really easy to be compatible with you know, other Apple gear. You know, what I have been thinking about, last year, like I said, Facebook made the shift to Meta, and there was that whole big buzz for a while about, you know, the future of the metaverse and what's going to happen. Is this like our next step to coming back to it? Because I feel like discussions have kind of died down about the metaverse.
Well, here's the thing. I think that, well, let me start with this. I was talking to a few friends about this yesterday, and they asked me, what's so special about this headset, right? And my answer was just one sentence: because Apple made it, right? We haven't spoken about virtual reality on this podcast or really amongst ourselves until Apple made this headset,
Right.
you know? So I think that this is definitely the next step forward. Just because Apple made it doesn't mean it's immediately more accessible to everyone. If anything, I mean, this is one of the more expensive headsets out there. From what we've seen, how they presented it, it is one of the better headsets in terms of precision.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be leaps and bounds above what other, you know, companies are putting out.
Exactly. It creates a lot more competition in the space, right? So companies who have existing virtual reality headsets are going to, you know, have to step up the game a little bit. But I think that now that we have a huge player that we didn't have before in the VR space, it's going to get more competitive. Maybe Google will come out with another product. Samsung will come out with something. It's going to be an integration into the product lineup. But the biggest cost barrier right now, and same thing with phones, and this will go away. This is just the stage we're at now. It's expensive. because to pack the existing technology into a headset, it's effectively a computer.
That's wrapped around your head.
Not just that, it comes with technically AirPods, right? It has its own speaker system, 2 screens, immensely advanced cameras, until that technology starts becoming cheaper, which is difficult now. You know, we had the supply chain issues, issues with factories, conflict with Taiwan, the semiconductor,
Crisis, yeah.
exactly. You know, I just thought of this. Does it connect to the internet, the headset?
It has to, I feel like.
I assume it does. Okay, so that means, right. So far and all that stuff.
Well, if you're going to be watching movies and watching NBA games too, you have to be.
But is it only Wi-Fi, or is it also
Oh, you mean like
compatibility?
That I don't know. I'm assuming if they want down the line people to be walking around with it on in the street, you know, it has to connect to cellular data.
Yeah, but what I would want to see, especially thinking about the battery technology has not advanced too much. I think that, like, right now we're using lithium-ion batteries, my computer, your computer, phones, stuff like that. That's standard. I think it's going to open up a whole new market when you think about portable power. People are walking around with this headset, right? You need a really small power storage source that you can't just keep making the battery bigger. It needs to become more efficient. I wonder what companies are going to start coming out with maybe some sort of alternative power to power these portable experiences.
Right. Interesting point. What do you think about, if you've seen the difference? Well, I mean, you already mentioned this is the best product on the market, but from the consumer's perspective, do you think that people are going to be choosing this over cheaper alternatives like Meta's Quest Pro 3?
Yes.
Really?
And I'll tell you why. Meta Quest Pro 3 exists in its own right. It's a separate product. Because of like with any other Apple product, it's because of the integration into their ecosystem. You know, I have an iPhone, I have a MacBook, I use both, you know? I can hand things off. That there's a bunch of different aspects of integration. And then there's also just the brand that Apple has created for themselves, you know? It's a much better designed product, in my opinion. I think it looks better than other virtual reality headsets. There is a trade-off because it is a little bit heavier because it's not made out of plastic, it's made out of aluminum glass. But I think that people might be more ready to adapt Apple's technology just because they're more familiar with the brand and it's not some sort of more outlandish experience.
They definitely did a good job of that same familiar layout that people are used to seeing on their phone, with like those same icons. The fact that you're able to recreate that, but just, you know, in your own space with you know, all around you, I think that will make people a lot more comfortable using that technology.
Exactly, because it's already a familiar platform. All you have to learn is how to interact with it. But another thing is, as I mentioned before, it's going to take developers time to actually get used to, you know, making apps for this. How do you make it more immersive for users? Thing is, Apple has immense pull right now, not like they had when they first came out with the iPhone. So I think this transition from stage 1 to stage 2, 3, 4 is going to be much faster. We even had Disney already announcing.
They're going to be on their day one, Disney Plus.
Exactly. Their CEO, Bob Iger, he came on. Apple now has this pull where a lot of other companies, a lot of developers are going to be more incentivized to bring their services to this headset.
Right. And it is also important to note that this is different than also Meta in the sense that it's not just VR, it's mixed reality. So both VR and AR. So you will have the experiences with Disney Plus, but you will also, like we said, like you'll be you'll be able to look around you at the same time and have the layout in the same way. So in the augmented reality sense.
Yes. So
things appearing all around you.
It's blending into the world that you have, which is, I mean, I've tried VR headsets before. Have you?
I have a couple times, yeah.
So it's basically, then you'll know what I mean. It takes you out of your existing world and puts you into a new world. What's really powerful about this headset is it's a mix of both. And Apple has that, for example, Facebook doesn't have experience making phones, right? Apple has years of experience making iPhones with immensely high quality cameras, right? And they can now put those cameras on the outside and then bring in the reality, bring in the real reality, you know, in a sense. They have experience with Macs, right? So now they have a processor that's powerful enough to handle all this stuff in real time. They have experience with AirPods, very high quality audio. Apple just has all the experience to make the elements of the headset.
Right.
Exactly. That pretty much wraps it up.
Well, let's pause.
Let's pause.
Okay, in case. Is there anything else you want to cover?
Specifically about the headset?
I feel like we went over things with Meta and Apple and Neuralink. Should we just wrap it?
We can wrap it up. Yeah, and then we'll focus on tomorrow's episode.
Okay.
Right.
On pause.
Oh.
All right. So that's going to conclude today's episode. We talked about a lot of the new emerging technology, kind of the future outlook as well, and, other related stuff in terms of Neuralink, where we see things going. So thank you everybody for watching. We have another episode coming out this week, so stay tuned for that.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.